notes on it. Documents. So documents are just like anything. They have document folders. They have places for you to put different types of documents. So the idea behind this was, or is, you can have things like, here's the RFP, here's our response, here's the contract, here's the signed contract, here's the bill we sent them, here's the reports we sent them, whatever. And so you can keep all of that here. And then anyone who's working on the grant in the future can come back and look at all of that information is centralized in one place on the grant itself. The next piece of, the next tab you see is something called assignments. So this is a little bit, you might think this is something it's not. So it's not who can bill to the grant, that's somewhere else. This is who's assigned to the grant. So some agencies have 10 grants and one grant manager, and you don't really need to know who's assigned to it. But we work with agencies that have between 200 and 300 grants. And within that, they have dozens of people that are assigned to do different things on the grant. So you might have who's primarily responsible for the grant, who's the grant accountant, who is the supervising attorney that oversees this grant or whatever. So just like case assignments, you can assign people in here as well. Contacts are like contacts in the agency, the funder. So you might have the CFO, the executive director, the person you call when you need to figure out where the check is, things like that. So you can put contacts, and you can have different contact types. List those here. So it's kind of like case contacts. Reports. So from my thinking, reports tab is actually one of the best features of this, because it allows you to create the various reports that you use to pull together your how you report back to the funder. So that could be a number of reports. Some funders, you're going to run 10 different reports throughout the year to get all the data that you need to report to them. This allows you to put it in one place. So these are just links to reports in the reports tab. And they allow you to put them in and then add a note. So for instance, if I was going to do that, I might come up here and click in the actions menu, add a report, and the screen to add the report shows me what we already have. But if I wanted to add another report, I just hit the plus button, select from our existing reports, whatever they are, and then type in my notes down here. I run this report every quarter for section, 3 of the annual report, whatever, right? So when you put that in, then if anyone else ever comes to the grant and needs to generate reports or is looking to see how you did things, you've got a list down here of all your reports with your note about what you use it for. And you click on that, it'll take you to the report itself. The next part are just your tasks and deadlines. So, this RFP is due whenever, this report is due whenever. You can assign different people. These will show up in your task list on your homepage, on your, in your calendar and whatnot. So that's some of the features on things that you can do on the grant itself. So I don't see any questions, so I'm just going to keep moving on. Or Xander, can you tell me if am I missing anything? I'm going to assume that's no.
Nope. You are good, and I will interrupt you if
good. Thank you. Awesome. So funding filters are the next thing. So what funding filters allow you to do is they allow you to filter, they allow you to set up the grants in different places first. So like one of the things you should know is that we store funding codes or grants on different objects in the database. So for instance, we store them on cases. So if you open a case, you can assign a grant. We store them separately on time slips. So while the time slip on a case may default to the funding code for the case, it will, you could choose a different funding code if you wanted on that time slip as well. So you could have funding code A on the case and funding code B on the case time slip. And then you can put them on, you can also put funding codes on outreaches as well. So then the filters allow you to basically select what are the parameters that must be met in order for this grant to show up. So if you don't put anything on this, then the grant will always show up. But if you said, this grant is only good on a case if the case is in such and such county and the client is over 60 years old. If the client is under 60 years old or doesn't live in that county, then this grant won't show up. It's not a grant that's eligible to show up on the case or on the time slip or whatever. So just one second. Sorry, just had my kid call me from school sick. So, all right. So back to this. So yeah, so you can assign different funding codes on a, funding filters by going to add and edit advanced filters. So when you add and edit advanced filters, you can see the list here of all the filters that are applied. So you can either edit those, or if you wanted to add a new one, you can select what object you want to filter on. So if it's information about a case, you would choose cases. So then within this, let's say that you, the person had to be, a certain veteran status. This has no value in it. So we'll just say they have to be HUD eligible. So once we select that field, then it shows the underlying values of that field. So if it's a lookup, it'll show the values of lookup. If it's a yes, no, it'll show those values. If it's an age or something, it'll show number ranges. So if we said on this grant, the person has to be HUD eligible, yes, then the system is going to check to see if the client is HUD eligible before it shows this grant. Down here, you can see where you can inactivate things and also put start and end dates. So theoretically, if a funder said, you know what, we're not going to require you to be a veteran anymore, we'll fund you no matter what, starting January 1st, 2018, you could put a start date here or an end date, depending on what you were doing, where it won't start checking those criteria until that date. So it's going to look for this start and end date to see if it's still an active filter or if it's become active yet. So if you know it's coming, you can put it for next year or whatever. If you know it's ending, you could end the current one or whatever, or just make it ineligible. So if you switch from different, modules, so like if you did a timekeeping one, these are all things that you might see on a time slip. So you might say, this funder will only fund certain things. They won't fund holiday time, for instance. So you could select just the things that they would fund. Or you might say, they'll only fund certain users. So a lot of times people say, well, only if these 5 people can bill time to that grant. Well, that's fine. You can select those 5 people. And then if you're not one of those 5 people, you're not allowed to bill time to the grant through that either. So that's stuff you might use on timekeeping. And then outreach, same thing. You can select different, fields on outreach to say, it's got to be, this type of outreach or whatever that it would fund. So you can do that on outreach, although that one's rarely used. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, so moving on. The other just kind of point here is that you can turn on funding codes for certain objects in the database altogether, right? Like you might say, I don't want to show this funding code for time slips because we're not getting paid by time, we're just getting paid by cases. And so don't show it in time slips, only show it in cases. Or you might have a grant where you're getting paid by time and you've already spent all the time, but you don't have enough cases yet. You said you're going to do 300 cases and you've done 250. So you need more cases to have the funding code, but you don't want to spend more time on it because you've already maxed out your time. You could turn off time and just leave on cases or whatever. So this allows you to set for each object in the database, cases, time slips, or outreaches. You can set whether or not you want it to show up at all. If you say you don't want it to show up, it won't show up. So all of this that I've shown so far is part of just the basic grants management, comes with Legal Server. So all of that is in everyone's. For the people that have advanced grants management, there's another concept in advanced grants management called that allows you to have contract terms. So I think in this sense, you want to think about the grant, the funding code or whatever, in this case, the Association About Immigrants, as kind of the hub of the wheel. And you want to think about each contract term as a spoke. So this demo site only has one spoke in our grants because we're lazy, but in most sites you would have multiple contract terms per grant. So if you got a contract in 2015, you'd have a start date January 1st to December 31st, 2015, January 1st, 2016 to December 31st, and on and on. So every year you got it, you'd have a start date and an end date. Now you could also have within that you might also start it in June or July or October or whatever. So the start and end dates of the contract term are actually really important, because when we're doing time slips and you have advanced grants management, you're actually looking for the contract term on, that's available on that day of the time slip. So if for instance, I was putting a time slip in on January 1st, 2019, the contract term we're looking at would not show up because it's out of the range of this contract term. So it will select the contract term for what it is in the range of. So if I click on the contract terms also have profiles, just like grants have profiles. So within the contract term, there's a couple things that are really important. The start and stop dates are really important. You can put in like types of contracts and, award start date and end date. All of that stuff may be different than the start and stop date for when you're going to charge time to it. The other really important thing in here is the value and the total salary budgeted amount. So you may get a contract, let's just say you got a grant for $100,000. You may take off $20,000 to cover rent and buy computers and do whatever you do for overhead. But the remainder of the grant would be what's called the total salary budgeted amount. That's the amount that gets spent down by time slips. So basically the idea of advanced grants management is that total salary budgeted amount is going to be an amount that is shrinking over time by the rate of each employee and their hours. So if my rate is $50 and I work 1 hour, this amount will be deducted by $50. If someone else's rate is $125 and they work, 2 hours, it's going to deduct it by $250. So it's just math at that point. It's the rate of the employee, and it's the amount of your total salary budget amount. So what you start out with as your total salary budget amount is different than what you have available to spend. So over time, this number is going to be moving towards zero. And we show you all the time how close you're getting to that, and then calculate how many days left in the contract term. So I'll show you some of that stuff. So hopefully that makes sense. There are other things in here that I can show you, but I'm just going to kind of stick to a few of the kind of high level stuff here. So one of the things that you can set in a contract term are goals. There are different types of goals, and this is basically a way to measure how you're doing on the grant. So you told the funder you'd close 400 cases. Well, how many cases have you closed during the contract term? This will show you how many you've closed, opened, how many hours you have, things like that. So actually, it looks like, is there a way, this is a question, is there a way to manually track time slips for partner subgrantees? I don't know what that means. Does someone want to speak up, and can you unmute yourself and ask the question or explain to me what a partner subgrantee is?
And I've unmuted you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. I just meant, I'm tracking a lot of grants where we're not the only, it's not just our organization's time slips that we have to track. So, we get invoices from partners. So a lot of grants are shared amongst, a number of partners. So I'm wondering, is there a place here where you could, like, I don't know, add in manually time slips for people who don't work at our organization? So they might not be, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, you could put in manually re-enter their time slips into your system to spend on the grant. You could also there are ways to adjust the grant. So there's one of the things I didn't show is down here. There's an amendment part where you can deduct and amend. You can amend the amount. So in other words, you can go in and say, like, well, we just sent a check to such and such organization for $4,000 for the work they did, and you can deduct it here, which is not really tracking it by time slip, but it's more by kind of just lessening the amount of the grant overall.
Okay.
So it wasn't really designed for what you just described.
Right, sure. I'm just,
Yeah, kind of like with everything. Yep, good question. And kind of like with everything, people use our system in different ways. So,
yeah, thank you.
Yep. So, all right. So if you wanted to add a goal, for instance, you could come in here and you could say, I want to add a contract term allocation goal. And when you say, if you say no goal, you don't see anything. When you say yes, then you can put the amount of whatever. So cases opened during the contract term is 400, track cases closed during the contract term of 200, whatever. And so that's how, when you add these goals in, that's how you see these, that graphic that shows you where you are to goal. So you can get a sense of how you're doing. Contract term allocations, this is just basically the allocation amount and then the funds available. So you can see this one had 158,000. Now it only has 15,000 available. So yeah, so that's one other thing that you can show here. So, all right, so that's basically the concept of how grants work and how contract term allocations work. So I'm going to shift to some of the more advanced grants management stuff, unless there's a question. Okay, so the concept behind advanced grants management is to take these contract term allocations and to spend them down, and then also to track kind of the mechanics of how your payroll system works. So we always start out at the beginning by just saying, the first place to start thinking about advanced grants management is just in your time slips. So every time slip that gets added to the system is kind of the start of the payroll process. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to add my time for today. As I work on all the different types of things I do, I'm giving them funding codes. And one of the things that's happening, well, there's a couple of things that are happening when I do this. So one of the things that the system is checking for, if we look at how the form is set up, you can see like the time slip here, but there's an couple important blocks in this time slip on this form. One of the things that it's looking for is it's looking for whether or not you're allowed to put time in for the pay period in which you're able to put it in, for which you're trying to put it in. So if I try to put in time for 2027 by mistake, you can have the system stop you, right? So that one of the things you can do is you can come down here with the date of service with lock dates, is just say, don't allow any time slip older than a certain number of days or newer than a certain number of days. So in other words, don't allow people to go in and put time in for 5 years from now. And it's not that they're trying to put time in for 5 years from now, it's that they're that they accidentally hit a key or something and they ended up putting a time slip in for way out in the future. We know this happens a lot because when we migrate data, we always see people's time in there, and you always have time way out in the future, like some years 3,000 and something, and whatever. So this just prevents that. That's one thing. But the other thing it's doing is it's checking where you are in the payroll process for this pay period. So the calendar is broken up into pay periods. Some people get paid every 2 weeks. Some people get paid twice a month. So based on how often you get paid and what the start date of the first day of the pay period is, we set up the pay period to be the first of the month to the 15th and the 16th to the end of the month. Is how some agencies work. Some agencies work every 2 weeks. So within that pay period, we're looking to see if the pay period has been posted yet, or if you've confirmed your time or whatnot. So that's kind of an important thing. So all this starts with the time slip. So you go into your time, you add the funding code, and the date of service, how much time you did, and all of that. So when you're done entering your time, you will have your timekeeping log. I don't have any time entered for this pay period, but I know for those of you who have Legal Server, I know there's some people are onboarding on our call. Maybe you haven't seen this, but this is where you see all of your time for the pay period. And at the end of this pay period, once I hit my requisite hours, so in this system, I'm supposed to work 70 hours every pay period. So I'm supposed to work 35 hours a week for 2 weeks. So if you notice in this pay period, there's two circles that are red with 0 in them. That's because the system expects me to put my time in, and I haven't put it in yet. You also notice that Saturday and Sunday are gray. They're always going to be gray because you're not expected to work on those days. So even if you did work, you would see time in on those days, but if it wouldn't change the color from gray, it would still be gray. Once I put a time slip in for Monday or Tuesday, this will turn from red to green, and it'll show me how many hours I have in for the day. So for instance, if I come in and I say, I'm going to take sick leave yesterday, and I just select, I was out for 7 hours yesterday sick. Now my time log has that time slip in it, but also you notice that it turns to green, and it's a green 7 up there. So as I add my time, it will change color and show me. When I get to 70 hours, then I'm allowed to confirm my time in this system. So confirmation is a way for every employee to come in and say, here's the work I did in the last 2 weeks, by day and by activity type. And I want to save, I want to confirm that I've done that time. So in the manual world, this is you signing a time slip. You come in, you check a box that says, I confirm that I work these hours. And this is basically a summary of the pay period that you worked. Does that make sense to everyone? Any questions on that? Okay. I'm going to give me 1 second because I don't want to switch to something here. In the system. So let me just switch to So the next thing that we're going to talk about, so the first step in the payroll process is the confirmation. That's where you come in. That's every employee going in saying, I worked this amount of time. The second, oh, we have a question here. Is it possible electronically approved timesheets by supervisor? That's a great question. The answer is yes. You can do that, and that's the second step. So first step is they confirm. Second step is that the supervisors verify. So step 1 in the payroll process, confirmation. Step 2, verification. So when you come down to this screen, you're basically looking at everyone's time that they entered, and what their total hours were, what their requisite hours were, and what their leave was, and all of that. So you can see, you get a list of all the time people have worked. And then you verify that time. So if I work 70 hours, my supervisor goes in and says, yep, I believe IV worked 70 hours. and you verify it. So once you verify it, I can no longer go in and change my time, because once it's confirmed, unless I unconfirm it, I can't change it. But then once it's verified, I can't even unconfirm it. So you could unverify it and then allow me to go back in and change it or whatever. But this is in essence the way that you're signing the time slip for the person that you're supervising. If you wanted to see what their time was, you could go in and click their time and attendance report, and it will show you the time, their time and attendance and the hours they worked and all that kind of stuff. So that's verification. The third step I can't really show on this. It's called finalization. We have another question. Can you approve vacations, adding them directly to the timesheet? So that's from Lisa. Lisa, I'm not sure what you mean by approve vacations. There's not a process in which you can request and get things approved. If someone's taking vacation, they would enter it in as a leave time slip, and then it would show up in their time as vacation, but there's not really a method to go in and approve their vacation or anything like that. Could you show the headers again? Yep, I can.
And while Ivy's doing that, I just wanted to mention especially for onboarding folks on the call, the Advanced Grants Management is an additional module. So there is an additional cost associated. We saw the regular grants management module, which comes by default across everybody's site, but this is an additional one with the Advanced Grants Management. So I just wanted to call that out again.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. That's a good thing, because this could be confusing for lots of reasons. I'm trying to keep it simple. So anyway, this is the verification stuff. I won't spend a lot of time on the third one, which is finalization, but finalization is it's the moment in the payroll process where all the magic happens. It's where we apply different distributions for, you can spread vacation out over multiple funding codes, or you can spread leave time or matter and supporting activity time out over multiple, they're called labor distributions. So if I put in my sick leave for 7 hours, that could be broken up between 5 different funders based on a percentage allocation that you want to distribute that. And I won't go into all the weeds on that, but that's possible, and that happens. So once that happens, then we go to the fourth step, which is called distribution. And distribution really lets you look at your grants and at your staff through a different lens. So the idea here is there are lots of columns, so you kind of have to follow along with what you're seeing. So this grant here, 1306 Federation of Foreclosed, this is the grant. The first column is showing me what the target distribution is. So what we know is there's a dollar amount on the grant that you have left to spend, and that hasn't been spent down yet. You also have a number of days left in the term. So if the term ends in December and it's November, you've got fewer days, obviously. And so it's doing math to figure out, if you were to spend down the grant on a line, on a straight line, you would spend down the grant every pay period until the end of the grant. And this one is saying you'd spend it down at $1,102.03. So this is your target distribution. That's if you were going to equally spend it every pay period from now until the end of the contract term. Your current distribution is based on all of the time that is in the system. You're going to spend down this grant $6,279.10. So you right now have allocated, you have charged, if you will, $6,200, almost $6,300 to this funding code for this pay period. So we're over by $5,000 5,177, meaning we're over our target. So if you look over here to the dollars variance, we're over target by $5,100. So that's fine. You don't have to do anything. You can be over. It's the next time if we were to save this, the next pay period, that number, that target distribution is going to be different because we spent a lot more. What we're trying to show you is that, if you spend at this rate, you're going to spend your grant out really fast. Or if you're way under, you're not spending your grant fast enough, you better start applying people's time to this grant, because you're going to get to the end of the grant and you're not going to have spent it. And then you have to adjust it. So, so there were 169 hours charged. And if I look down here, you can see each person. So Penny worked 0.97 at her rate. That's $67.29. Mary worked 63.22 hours at her rate. It's almost $2,000 and then down. So these numbers add up to this 169. These numbers add up to the current distribution. And I won't go into all the weeds over here, but the other big one here is that when you save a time slip, we're not just saving the fact that you picked funding code A. We're saving the fact that funding code B, C, and D were also available and you didn't pick them. So we know that they are available. And what we're showing over here is that if you wanted to move time from this funder to another funder, you've got these other funds that were available when you save the time slip. And if you need to move time to this funding code, there are other places that you didn't pick this funding code, but you could have, that you can move time into this funding code. So it allows you to distribute it here. Was there another question? Looks like it.
Yeah, there's another question. We're talking about staff time, but what about other expenses in a grant?
Do you mean like travel expenses, things like that?
Believe so, yes.
Yeah, so we just built a module for another agency to do expense tracking. We haven't merged it into our code yet for all of AGM, but we do have a module that will track expenses and spend down the grant based on expenses as well. So if you want to, so there's a question here about distribution of time. So if you wanted to redistribute time, if you click this redistribute link, it will open up and it will show you, here's all the type. So you have $3,451 that you can move from the source grant, which is this grant, into other grants. And then for other time, non-case time, you have this amount that you could move into other source grants. And if you wanted to move time into this grant, you could move from other grants into this grant, this amount of case time, this amount of other time, and this amount of outreach time. So if you were to click this, this will pull up all the different time slips where you've got time that you could bring over. So you can come over here and say, yeah, you have this funding code, and you've got a total of 73 time slips that you could pull from. So if I wanted to say, yeah, I definitely want to move it out of this fund into that fund, you would select this and then go from there. So hopefully, Robin, that helps. Good. Okay, so this will take a second to load because it's to recalculate everything. But there's another lens to look at the same thing through. A lot of people like to look at it by staff. So basically, it's the same. It's similar information as over here. It's just calculating it based on for every staff person and all the grants that they bill to. So this kind of gives you a lens into, Sally Smith billed these 7 grants in this amount in this pay period and whatever. So it kind of gives you a lens into that. So you can see here, Claire has, billed to all these grants. Total of 70.4 hours, and then it shows you her hours, her what was charged, the value of those charged hours, and then she has, because she only gets paid for 70 hours, she has, this site is set up so that she has 0.4 hours that are uncharged. So it shows you the 0.4 hours that got uncharged there as well. So this is the distribution step. And then, so that's so once you're okay with that, you hit distribute. And then the final step you hit is to post the time. So this locks down the pay period altogether. And so this allows you to come in and say, okay, we're not changing the time anymore. Once we post it, it's not, you're not able to change it. So if you change it, if you need to change it, there's a, here's another question, sorry. If you move time, does that change the time slip? Is the record of time changed by admin? If you move, so it doesn't change the time slip. This is getting into the weeds and I don't want to make this harder than it is. It changes, there are things on time slips in AGM called sub rows. All the sub rows add up to the duration of the time slip. So that's how we can say my sick leave got distributed across 5 different funding codes. There would be 5 sub rows on my time slip that all added up to those 7 hours. Each one would be to a specific funder. So when we shift funds, we create a negative time slip, a negative sub row for the original funding code that was selected and add a positive one to the one that has been added so that you have an audit trail, a record that it was funding code A, but then we moved it to funding code B. If you need to, you can dig into that time slip and see that. I don't know if that makes sense, but is that helpful? I love that everyone's on mute because I can ask questions like, is that helpful? And just answer them myself. Like, yes, that was very helpful. Thank you. And then move on. So hopefully it was indeed helpful. So coming back to posting, basically here you can see the breakout. And this is kind of how some accounting systems see it. So this shows you the breakout graphically of how it looks, you know, on the screen, or not graphically, but in a tabular format on the screen. And then depending on what you use for your accounting software, there's a module that will let you export this in a way that can be imported then into your accounting system. So this is called posting. So anyway, that's 40 minutes of grants management. Hopefully it's been a helpful overview. I try to hit the high level pieces of this, but if anyone has questions, I'm happy to stay on for a little bit, but this is basically what the system does. Xander, are there questions in chat or anything?
Nope. There was a question, can we talk about provisioning our journal entry? And then a question, is this recorded anywhere? For the recorded anywhere, we do have help documentation on advanced grants management on the help site. And so you can just search for AGM or advanced grants management and you'll find our documentation there. The regular grants management, we do have a playlist on our YouTube channel. We'll be sending out an email with a link to that as well as to the advanced grants management documentation. And then I think there was a question about journal entries.
Yeah, I think Robin left. Looks like, oh, offline, she's saying. Yeah, Robin, I will call you about, I got your email about journal entries. So I will call you about that. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I hope this has been helpful. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to email us, or look, as Xander said, there's help documentation you can review as well.
There was a question that they're new to their org and they don't see a regular grants management legal server, is it standard? Yes, it is standard. If you don't see grants as a tab on that blue bar at the top, that may mean that your admin has just hidden that from various users. So just go, ask the admin in your on your site about that grants tab. If you're onboarding and you don't see that grants tab on that blue ribbon, feel free to reach out to your onboarding contact, whether that's Leah, myself, or Robin. We'll help you track that down.
Great.
I think that that's it for today. Just wanted to call out that our next session for Tuesday trainings is going to be office hours with Ron for admins and report builders. May especially be helpful for folks who are gearing up for the LSC Bridging the Gap survey that folks have been doing. So as you're prepping to meet that reporting deadline on Friday, we do have that dedicated office hour on Tuesday for any questions you may have about that report.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Al.